And now, APEC week is still in full swing here in Gyeongju, but we're going to take a step back and look at what APEC 2025 Korea has delivered so far and what to watch for next. Joining us here in the Gyeongju studio is our foreign affairs correspondent, Oh Soo-young. Welcome back, Soo-young.
Hi again, Tammy.
And also joining us on my left is Professor Matthew Jenkins. It's good to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Why don't we start with the ROK-U.S. summit? Now, the huge outcome is that President Donald Trump gave South Korea a green light for a nuclear-powered submarine. What lies ahead now? I mean, what next for South Korea?
So first, South Korea is going to have to wait till it's approved by Congress, so it's far from a done deal, right? So then once it is approved by Congress, it's going to have to go under the scrutiny by the IAEA to make sure that it's not in violation of the non-proliferation treaty, right? Because Korea is going to be enriching, using highly enriched uranium, which is a big deal, right? So that's going to take some time to process. And then finally, of course, we'll have to wait to see what the reaction was from North Korea, from China, from Russia, from Korea's neighbors, which is probably going to be big. Right?
We are expecting some clashes over that project. Now, Soo-young, on top of the ROK-U.S. summit, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung made time to sit down with Japan's new Prime Minister. She is Sanae Takaichi. Now, what stood out from that meeting?
Well, the biggest takeaway was both the leaders' commitment to the resumption of shuttle diplomacy.
Right.
This means top-level exchanges, the leaders going back and forth between Seoul and Tokyo without any, traditional constraints or whatever limit. They're just going to meet randomly to work on joint areas of joint challenges and areas of interest, such as tackling North Korea's nuclear issue, for instance. So the 40-minute or so meeting that we saw between President Lee Jae-myung and Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, we were expecting them to have a very cordial meeting as their first initial sit-down together after Takaichi took office earlier last month. But we saw a surprising level of friendliness and warmth between the two leaders, actually, which was quite notable among observers. President Lee Jae-myung, he presented Takaichi with seaweed, Korean seaweed, and K-beauty products, because Takaichi, on her first day of being inaugurated, had given a press conference and she said, I actually love Korean culture. She says she loves K-beauty products, she loves seaweed, kimchi, so that was, a thoughtful gift. And she, in return, gave President Lee Jae-myung a gift of stones from a sister city in Japan of his hometown Andong in South Korea. So that's a very personal gift, and they were smiling at each other. Prime Minister Takaichi, she even bowed before the Korean flag, but she briefly just stopped and nodded in front of the Japanese flag. So all these gestures were very carefully thought out, and they didn't mention contentious issues.
They did not.
But they talked about, cooperation and their future-oriented ties. So that was very impressionable.
Perfect for ice breaking, sharing gifts in a casual setting. Professor Jenkins, I have to turn to you for this. One of the biggest shaping points during this APEC period was the summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Now, the two leaders decided to step back, and stop their open trade escalation. For now, how does that change in dynamic? How does that change into the upcoming summit between President Yi and Chinese leader Xi Jinping?
Yeah, so I think President Yi's main economicals are to secure rare earth elements, deal with that with China. So I think that's his main concern. Obviously, that would be impossible if they were still trying to maintain the curb. So that definitely gives President Yi a lot of breathing room in terms of negotiating with China. And also in terms of the free trade agreement with China, it's probably going to go to the second stage of free trade talks and hopefully secure some exemptions from tariffs, especially for semiconductors, medium-level semiconductors to China. So I think he'll be in a pretty good position there, although the submarine issue might make the discussions a bit awkward, so we'll have to see exactly how that plays out.
Right, that summit taking place this later in the afternoon. Now, Soo-young, I do have to mention North Korea will inevitably be on the agenda. Like President's office spokesperson Kang Woo-jung said, they will talk about Korean Peninsula issues. Now, Seoul is expected to ask Beijing to play a constructive role dealing with North Korea issues, its nuclear program. Now, how will that go? And do you think China will listen this time?
Well, I think the biggest media focus today on the Ishi summit is going to be whether there's mention of North Korea's denuclearization in that readout after the leaders' meeting. And there certainly has been pressure by North Korea towards China. It appears like it because during the foreign ministers meeting between South Korean Foreign Minister Cho Hyun and his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi in September, there was no. It was found that China had not changed its stance on North Korea's denuclearization, but at the same time, the meeting between Kim Jong-un, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, and Chinese President Xi Jinping in early September had concluded without mention of denuclearization. And in every previous summit that they had always discussed the matter of denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula and working towards peace and stability. So the big question here is, has China actually changed its tune? Is it being more tolerant of North Korea's nuclear ambitions? And that's the big concern right now. And our foreign minister has told press that he felt reassured by his Chinese counterpart that China hasn't changed its position, and it maintains its support for denuclearization. But it's been quiet about denuclearization so far, right? And the mention
even
of
during the official handover ceremony.
Exactly. It was notably absent from President Xi's remarks. So we're wondering, is that going to be appearing after his meeting with Yi in China's readout? In Korea's readout, we might find it, but the question really is what we'll see when it comes to Beijing's press release or whatever outcome they decide to deliver.
Definitely, Soo-young, we've been covering the wrap-up of APAC so far, but Professor Jenkins, APAC is not over yet. We are just on day 2 of the APAC 2025 at Korea. Professor Jenkins, how would you grade APAC 2025 so far? I mean, what will count as a successful APAC?
So I think from Korea's perspective, I would say it's pretty successful in terms, well, depending on what happens with Xi today. I think really that's going to, everything's going to hinge on that, because that's one of the most important things for Korea, other than the deal with the United States, the investment deal and the submarine deal. So, I mean, I would say that ultimately, I think for from Korea's perspective, I think the big win is the de-escalation of the tensions between the United States and China. That's going to benefit Korea more than pretty much any specific deal, right? So that's the main thing. In terms of Korea's grander ambitions, right, in creating a multilateral framework, I would say that probably has not succeeded. They're trying to push the Gyeongju proclamation in order to create sort of a instead of a bilateral country-to-country thing, sort of a shared culture. We'll see how that turns out. So far, I'm going to say that given that Trump sort of skipped the multilateral aspect of the negotiations and went straight to country talks, I'm going to say that probably is not going to go through.
Well, Soo-young, you've been covering on the ground here in Gyeongju with me the entire APAC 2025 Korea. It's been a super diplomatic week here in the host city. Now, when talking about, on top of the Gyeongju Declaration, what about the significance of South Korea's diplomacy during APEC period, and as well as President Lee Jae-myung's pragmatic diplomacy? What's the significance?
I think this entire APEC week really marks the highest point of Korea's diplomacy that we've seen in modern history. And that might sound, a bit exaggerated, but I'm serious, Tammy. I think this week has shown, first of all, that K-democracy is real. After, emerging from this, less than a year after emerging from this political crisis that we faced after now impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol's martial law declaration, the country has been able to come together and stage this multilateral conference. And with this APEC meeting this week, we've been able to prove that we do have the resilience and the kind of social solidarity to be able to stage the summit. So that's been one point. And more diplomatically, more broadly speaking, on the diplomatic front, South Korea, it seems to have reached a level of diplomatic prowess that it's been seeking for years and years. In the early 2010s, South Korea was trying to brand itself as a global convening power, as a middle power that brings countries together for global cooperation, and to also work as a mediator for regional rivals and really be a part of driving global governance. And today we see a transition where Korea is no longer a participant in the international community, but it's a driver of multilateralism, and more than that, it's trying to lead global governance as well amid all this geopolitical chaos that we're seeing. So for Korea, this APEC meeting has definitely been that. And President Lee, he's not only held bilateral sideline meetings by himself, but he's created this platform for the two biggest economies in the room, the US and China, to come together and diffuse tensions, which was a critical moment for the region and the world.
Vital.
Exactly, very vital. So we can see here that South Korea, we're maybe seeing the peak of its soft power, and today is, this wrap up of this meeting. We're not only going to have the Gyeongju Declaration, but there are all these diplomatic side achievements that ought to be celebrated as well.
Well, we'll take your words for that. Oh Soo-young, it's been lovely covering the APAC 2025 Korea with you in Gyeongju. Thanks for coming in today.
My pleasure, Tammy.
And also, Professor Jenkins, it's a pleasure to have you with us. We appreciate your insights and your time.
It was my pleasure.